Hey everyone, today we are going to build a mental toolkit that will literally change how you see the world around you. We're going to learn how to start thinking like an economist.
So let's just dive right in. The best way to think about this is like our own little study group for PP 5375, Economic Analysis for Public Policy and Management. Everything we're talking about today comes straight from the readings for Section 1. That's the Pindyck and Rubenfeld textbook, plus the lecture notes and the slides. Our goal is to really get a grip on what this thinking like an economist thing is all about.
Here's the game plan. First up, we'll tackle the big picture. What's the difference between micro and macroeconomics? Then, we're going to get into the right mindset for an analyst, learning how to separate what is from what should be. After that, we'll open up the Economist Toolkit and check out the core principles that guide all of their thinking. And finally, we'll see how all this theory actually works in the real world when we look at costs and choices.
Okay, let's start with that big picture. You see, the entire field of economics is really split into two main camps, and understanding this split is like step one.
But before we get there, what even is economics? Well, at its very heart, it all boils down to one single fundamental problem: scarcity. Right? We all want infinite stuff, but we live on a planet with finite resources. Economics is just the study of how we deal with that. How do we, as people, as companies, as whole countries, make choices when we can't have it all?
And that basic problem leads us to these two branches. So, Pindyck and Rubenfeld explain it like this. Microeconomics zooms way in. It's looking at the individual players. You, me, a single business, a worker trying to decide between two jobs. It's all about those small-scale decisions. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, zooms way out. It's the 30,000-foot view of the entire economy. We're talking big things like inflation, unemployment, national GDP. Now, for our purposes in this course, and for a lot of policy analysis, we are going to be living almost entirely in the micro world.
All right, next up is maybe the single most crucial tool for any policy analyst. It's learning to build a mental wall between objective reality and our own personal values.
And this is the core difference between what we call positive and normative analysis. Positive analysis is all about the world as it is. It makes claims you can actually test with data. It's about cause and effect. If we do this, that will happen. It's basically science. Normative analysis, though, that's about how we think the world should be. It's loaded with value judgments and opinions. So, a simple way to remember it: positive is for prediction, normative is for prescription.
So, take a look at these questions. Do minimum wage laws cause unemployment? Do cigarette taxes reduce smoking? We can actually investigate these. You and I might have different hunches, but we could agree on a way to use data to try and find the answer. These are all positive questions.
Now, compare those to these statements. See the key words? Ought to be, should be. These are value judgments. Economics can't prove that welfare payments should be reduced. But, and this is so important, good, positive analysis can inform that normative debate. An economist can say, okay, my models predict that if we cut welfare payments, here's the likely effect on poverty, and here's the likely effect on the budget. Then, we as society can use that information to make our value judgment.
Okay, so we've got our focus, micro, and we know how to separate our facts from our feelings. Now it's time to open the toolkit and check out the fundamental rules of the road for economic thinking. According to our lecture notes, pretty much all of microeconomics can be boiled down to these 4 ideas. 1, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Everything involves a trade-off. 2, the real cost of something isn't the price tag. It's what you had to give up to get it. We'll talk more about that. It's called opportunity cost. 3, smart decisions are rarely all or nothing. We make choices about small, incremental changes. We think at the margin. And 4, and this is huge for policy, people aren't robots. Their behavior changes when the costs and benefits of their actions change. In other words, people respond to incentives. Let's just double-click on that second principle for a second, because it's a game changer. Opportunity cost. It's like the ghost of the road not taken. When you choose to do one thing, you are simultaneously choosing not to do something else. The opportunity cost is the value of the best thing you gave up. It's a simple idea, but it is incredibly powerful. So let's make this real for us right now. What is the true economic cost of doing 1 year of this grad program? Now, your first instinct might be to just look up the tuition, right? But an economist hears that question and says, hold on, what else could you have been doing with that year? And boom, here it is.
This is a perfect illustration. Using the example from the notes, let's say tuition and fees are $12,000. Okay, that's part of the cost, but the giant, often invisible cost is the salary you're not earning, the $40,000 job you gave up to be here. So the actual economic cost isn't $12,000, it's $52,000. That is opportunity cost in action.
All right, enough theory. Let's get our hands dirty and put these ideas to work. We're going to see how these principles show up in actual public policy, using a couple of great examples from our readings.
So picture this. You're living in Charlottesville, Virginia, back in the early 1990s. The city landfill is almost full, and the way things work is you just pay a flat fee for garbage collection every year. Now, let me ask you, under that system, what does it cost you personally to put one more bag of trash out on the curb?
The answer? Nothing. Zilch. That yearly fee is what economists call a sunk cost. You have to pay it no matter how much trash you make. So the marginal cost, the cost of that one extra bag, is zero. So what did the city do? They changed the incentive. They introduced a new program where you had to buy a special 80-cent sticker for every single bag you put out. All of a sudden, the marginal cost of trash wasn't zero anymore.
And what happened? People responded to that new incentive big time. The number of trash bags collected dropped by a whopping 37%. Success, right? Well, kind of. See, the weight of the garbage only went down by 14%. So what were people doing? They were compacting their trash, doing what became known as the Seattle Stomp, to cram more garbage into each 80-cent bag. And even worse, some people started dumping their trash illegally to avoid the cost altogether. A textbook case of unintended consequences.
And this just nails the core lesson here. The people of Charlottesville were being perfectly rational. Under the old system, the marginal cost was zero, so the benefit of a clean house always won. Under the new system, they did a quick mental calculation for every bag. Is getting this trash out of my house worth 80 cents? That simple calculation, weighing marginal benefits and marginal costs, drives almost all human behavior.
Let's switch gears to another huge policy debate, the minimum wage. This chart from Pindyck and Rubenfeld is just fascinating. The top line shows the nominal wage. That's the dollar value written into law. It mostly goes up, right? But the bottom line is the real wage. That's the wage adjusted for inflation, what you can actually buy with it. And look at that. The purchasing power of the minimum wage in 2010 was actually lower than it was back in the 60s and 70s.
And this whole issue just perfectly ties together everything we've talked about. There's a positive question. What is the actual, testable effect of raising the minimum wage on jobs? Economists spend their careers studying that. But then there's the normative question. Is it fair? Is it just? Should we have a minimum wage, regardless of the effects? And that's a value judgment that we have to make as the society.
So let's wrap our study session up. If you're going into policy analysis, here are the big takeaways. 1. Remember that everything, at its core, is about managing scarcity. 2. Always, always, always separate your positive analysis from your normative beliefs. Be the scientist first. 3. To find the real cost of anything, you have to ask, what was the next best alternative? That's the opportunity cost. And finally, never forget that incentives drive the world. If you change the marginal costs or benefits, you will change people's behavior.
So I'll just leave you with this one last question to chew on. Now that you've got this new set of lenses, this new way of looking at costs and choices and incentives, what's one public policy, any policy at all, that you'll just never see the same way again? Thanks for joining the study group.